We explore the movie Sisu, Road to Raven. We talk about the storyline and give a summary of the plot and look at the cast and main characters. We also cover the film's production details and box office's performances. Finally, we share reviews and personal reactions. So let's begin. The film opens with the narration about a painful period in history. Finland was forced to give some of its land to the Soviet Union, which pushed many Finnish peoples out of their homes. Many were sent to their Siberian prison camps. A Soviet Red Army commander named Igor is very proud of himself. He is about to meet a KSV officer who knows that Dragonev was responsible of killing Artemy's family, and even that the Artemy's filled rage and turned him into deadly killing machine known as Koi. The bikers catch up to the officer offers Dragonev payment to find Artemy and kill him once and for all. Artemy begins his journey back home with the recovered gold in his truck. Dragonev and his men track him down. Dragonev prepares to execute Artemy inside his truck. Sensing the danger, Artemy reacts fast and kills most of the Soviet soldiers, including running one of them over by reversing his truck. After killing most of the man is thrown back into the Dragonev's shield. Arjami aims his rifle at Dragonev but decides to let him live, not realizing who really is at first. Dragonev then meets his men on motorcycle and continue the chase. The bikers catch up to Arjami and one of them manages to shoot him in the leg. Most of the bikers crash and get blown up or even beheaded. A large explosion forces Arjami to stop and fire spreads through the forest. He takes time to cool down his truck and to treat his wound. Meanwhile, Dragonev orders reinforcements and commands them to unleash hell. Fighter planes are sent after Arjami. He gets back behind the wheel and briefly hides in a barn. But the planes quickly start bombing the area. Arjami manages to bring one plane down in the woods by stopping suddenly, causing its wing to clip something, sending the pilot into a deadly crash. He waits until it quits before moving on. Another fighter jet attacks Arjami from side of a cliff. He avoids the gunfire as the pilot flies directly toward the truck. Arjami shoots one of the spokes on his truck and then hits the brakes, sending pieces of wood forward to form a ramp. This causes the jet to lift briefly before crashing. More bombs are dropped, killing the pilot and forcing Arjami's truck off cliff into the river. The truck is destroyed, but Arjami manages to pull himself and his dog out of the water alive. He builds a rifle from the wood and comes across tank. Arjami gathers a large amount of explosive and he moves toward the border, where Dragonev and his men were waiting. He speeds up by pouring fuel into the engine, then sets off explosive, flipping the entire tank over the barrier and over Dragonev's head. The tank crashes and breaks apart. Arjami lets the dog go free, but he is captured because they want him alive. Dragonev takes Arjami prisoners and puts him on train heading back to Siberia, where Arjami is brutally beaten in the back. Dragonev later enters and tells Arjami that he is the man who killed his family. He says the only person remembers is Arjami's older son, who stood in front of him to protect his mother and baby mother. Dragonev proudly says he cut the boy into pieces and fed him to attack dogs. He then tells Arjami that is not a legend but a monster. Arjami takes a knife and kills a sleeping soldier by stabbing him in the heart. He quietly moves through the train, trying not to wake anyone. The first guard is easy to get past, but the second is harder. Arjami throws a piece of meat in respect of soldier, then stabs another while he sleeps. He escapes the car, but the soldier beneath him wakes up because of dripping blood and falling body. In the last car, Arjami steps on broken glasses after a soldier drops his bottle. Soldiers wake up for forcing Arjami to start killing them. Dragonev, riding in another car with the KGB officers, uncouples to train and leaves Arjamis behind. Arjamis then discovers a massive machine gun in his car. Meanwhile, Dragonev arrives to collect the payment of capturing Arjami. However, Dragonev betrays the KGB officer and his men, killing them all and taking the money for himself. Arjami ignites the missile and rides it through the guards, crashing through a window and fighting his enemy. Dragonev puts up a strong fight and kicks Arjamis back toward the missile. He gives Arjamis a chance to give up, but Arjamis secretly removes the missile's holding pin. The missiles start moving again toward Dragonev. Arjami jumps away and his missile slams into Dragonev's head before exploding violently at the Finnish border. Arjami finally reaches the Finland with all his recovered gold. He shows his papers to the border guard, who recognize him and salutes him. During the rebuilding of his new home, Arjami gets his dog back. A group of local men approach him with tools. At first, Arjami thinks they want to fight him. Instead, one of them says he looks like someone who could use help. Arjami is clearly grateful as they begin helping him rebuild. The film then reflects on the full journey. After the war, Arjami returned to his old home on the Soviet side, recover his gold so he could rebuild his life in a new land. A former Red Army commander, Dragonev, the man who murdered Arjami's wife's son, was released from prison by KGB officials who learned of Arjami's return and wanted him to eliminate it. Dragonev hunted Arjamis with motorcycle troops, but most of them failed or died. Arjami was eventually captured and placed on a train to Siberia, where Dragonev revealed his identity while Arjami was tortured. Driven by revenge, Arjami freed himself, killed most of the Soviet soldiers, and finally rode to missile to confront Dragonev. After a brutal fight, Arjami lets the missile crash and kill Dragonev. Sisu, Road to Revenge, was released on Friday and a sequel to 2022 film Sisu, thought it does not include a second in the title. Some viewers did not realize that it was a sequel, which feels like a smart marketing choice. It works as a stand-alone film, and you do not need to watch the first movie to understand or enjoy it. So, watching both is recommended. The story is simple and direct. Arjami's corpse is a hardened, sacred, and ex-soldier who looks more like a quit farmer than an action hero. His true strength is that never gives up, never backs down. He goes through hell again and again, suffering non-stop, but he always finds a way to survive and rise up. Everyone who tries to stop him along the way ends up dying in brutal ways. The first movie would have worked as a smart and well-made action film in any era, but it came out of the time when watching villains get beaten as especially satisfying. It is set near the end of the World War II, when a group of fleeing Nazis try to steal gold that he has discovered and are violently and miserably killed by him. In chapter 4, we learn his backstory. He was a Finnish commander during the Winter War. After his family was murdered, he became a legendary one-man killer, feared for killing over 300 Soviet soldiers. In Sisu, Road to Revenge, he is given to chance to confront the man responsible for his family's death, even he is only trying to complete one simple task that he refuses to give up. He crosses back into his old home, now in land taken by Soviet Union. He carefully numbers the wooden boards of his cabin, takes them apart one by one and leads them into his truck. At the first, he believes he is just traveling back to Finland, not seeking any revenge. But the authorities learn about the return. A KGB official releases a notorious war criminal from a Siberian prison. The man who killed Atmai's sons chopped him with a shovel, hoping he can stop the monster they once created in exchange for his freedom. The writer-director is clearly inspired by the Rambo films and even is set to direct another project with a dark, violent tone. In the end, Atami only wants to take his with home and leave, and the movie mostly becomes a powerful, almost silent action story about survival and determination.
There is a clear influence from George Miller, especially The Road Warrior. The Soviet soldiers wear scary, mask-like helmets and ride motorcycles, throwing explosives and climbing on top of vehicles. What I really like is that he is not only trying to escape, but also trying to protect the wooden boards from his cabin. When his truck sinks, he turns the cabin pieces into a raft. Later, he even uses parts of the truck at the right moment to create a ramp that launches a fighter plane trying to dive bomb him. The action treats physics in a smarter way, closer to movies like Fast and Furious or The Transporter, but done much better and less silly. I also feel some Spielberg-style influence in how he keeps facing new problems and has to quickly improvise. Things often go wrong in a darkly funny way, and he always gets back up, silently planning his next move. He is nothing like Indiana Jones. He is more like Rambo or John McClane in their later films. He can do incredible things, but only after suffering serious pain, injuries, and physical punishment. There are even clear nods to Die Hard, such as moments where he is injured and still forced to keep going. This is a strong international genre film that fully embraces its identity and attitude without holding back. The director works again with the same cinematographer, editor, and production designer, and the film confidently uses Finnish language. It is also fun to see the villains portrayed as ruthless and unhinged, this time with heavy Russian accents. Most importantly, the actor playing Dragunov is a perfect match for this kind of violent, physical confrontation. It is hard to imagine a better opponent for this hero. If there is ever another film, it might be interesting to see him face a much younger and fitter enemy, just for contrast. Sisu, Road to Revenge combines many elements I love in action cinema, very little dialogue, powerful music by Yuri Sepa, and violent, graphic encounters that feel almost like a slasher movie. The story is built in a very simple and smart way, like a classic action movie or a western. At the same time, the creative and over-the-top use of weapons and vehicles feels like a different kind of great action film. Some movies with these qualities are fun to watch but easy to forget. That may not be the case here, because the director finds a way to end the film on a genuinely emotional note that gives the whole story more meaning. In interviews, the director has said he loves where the story ends and feels it could be a perfect ending. At the same time, he also has an idea for a third movie that he might want to make. I am happy with either option. I am just glad he is making movies again and seems to be on a strong creative run. After watching this film, I would not want to stand in his way. What surprised me most is that this movie actually moved me emotionally. He finally makes it home and starts rebuilding his house. Suddenly, a group of men approach him carrying axes, hammers, and other tools. Like him, we expect a fight. He prepares himself. Then one of the men says, "We thought you might need some help." They explain that these are not weapons, but tools. Adami becomes emotional, and the man tells him he does not need to say anything. That moment hits hard. Even this legendary, almost immortal warrior, who refuses to show his feelings, has carried everything alone for so long. The simple act of kindness overwhelms him. For the first time, someone helps him without asking for anything in return. During the end credits, we see him laughing, working, and sharing moments with others. He makes friends. He smiles. Maybe even tells a joke. This feels similar to First Blood. Rambo goes through extreme violence and suffering, and in the end, he finally breaks down and reveals his pain. Adami would never do that, but he is just as broken and emotionally closed off. When his emotions finally surface in a quiet way, it is just as powerful. It is a movie about creative and brutal ways to kill terrible people, but it is also much more than that. The best thing about Sisu is its no-nonsense style. It is a fast, thrilling action movie with no unnecessary side stories, and the sequel keeps the same approach. This time, the main character, Adami Korpi, takes on the Red Army. During the Winter War, he killed more than 300 Soviet soldiers on his own to avenge his family, and years later he had become a legend after discovering gold. Atomy begins a journey back to his family home in Karelia, where he once lived with his wife and 2 sons before they were brutally murdered by Soviet soldiers in 1944. After surviving the war, he decides to return, take what remains of his home, and rebuild it somewhere safe. However, soon after crossing the border on his way to Finland, his path is blocked by a group of Soviet soldiers. He senses danger when he sees a Molotov cocktail in one soldier's hand and knows he must act fast. Atomy quickly and cleverly kills all the soldiers but spares one man, Igor, because he had not tried to shoot him. Atomy does not realize that Igor is the very man who murdered his family. Igor, however, understands exactly who Atomy is and knows that stopping him will not be easy. Still, he accepts the challenge. He orders motorcycle troops and even fighter pilots to hunt Atomy down. Just after Atomy finishes killing the bikers, he is attacked from the air. With no good options, he hides in a barn, but it offers little protection. He gets back on the road, but the plane keeps targeting him, and eventually his truck crashes into a lake. It looks like the end, but Atomy releases his dog and uses the wooden logs as a makeshift raft to stay afloat. While drifting, he finds an abandoned tank. He loads the gold onto it and drives toward a Soviet camp, planning to destroy it. The plan fails when the tank is wrecked, leaving Atomy badly injured. With no other choice, he surrenders. As soon as he steps out, he stabs his own leg with a knife so he will bleed and not heal easily. Atomy is captured and brutally tortured. He is hung from the ceiling of a train wagon like meat, and hot iron is repeatedly pressed against his body. He is covered in blood when Igor arrives. Igor realizes that Atomy can endure extreme physical pain, but he knows the one thing that truly breaks him is the memory of his family's murder. Igor describes in detail how he killed Atomy's wife and sons. He recalls Atomy's older son as Fearless, a boy who tried to attack him and protect his mother and younger brother until his final breath. Igor looks Atomy in the eyes and promises to destroy the fire inside him. He says Atomy is nothing but flesh and vows to erase the legend, even using the wood from his house as fuel. Instead, his words only feed Atomy's rage. Once Igor leaves, Atomy gathers all his strength and fury, breaks free from his restraints, and begins killing the soldiers guarding the train. Outside the wagon, the guards panic when they see that Atomy has escaped. One of them steps inside to stop him, and the result is exactly what you would expect. Atomy is unstoppable. The soldier we had gone in the jack on Atomy had assumed that he did not have any weapon, but he had no idea what he was dealing with. Son pulled the knife blood out of the flesh and held his clothes while walking from Mentode. He tried to move his silently because he did not want to create chores. Before he reached his struggle, Atomy tried his best to be quiet, but it was a couple of soldier has to relieve himself, and Atomy has choices but to kill them. Undoubtedly he could have killed out soldier only to train with ease, but he was an honorable man and he did not want to pull Bill's blood for the sake it off in the sequel. There was a few moments of RA humor, such as when Atomy was walking on top of the train, and suddenly a cheek pipe flew in his direction and ended up failing into one of the weapon that was full of Soviet soldier. They tried to shoot him down, but we are talking about an invisible man flew by, but the rage of Re is no way one can stop him. Atomy grabbed hold of machine guns and fired repeatedly until the wagon went completely silent. Egger was in the wagon next to the one Atomy was in. He heard the gunshot and immediately realized that it must be him. I figured that he legioned around him was indeed true, and the only way to escape his fate was to unseal the gobbling Atomy's Igors began take off. And while he was frustrated at first, he soon noticed the Baikal right inside him. He immediately decided to use it as a quick fixer booster to catch up with Iger. Now Iyer figured there was no way he could stop Atomy. But he also had his eyes on the money he was promised by his KGB handler. So immediately after disjointing the coupling, he showed a KGB agent he was dealing with. His handler offered him the money he was promised, hoping that would be enough for Go to let go for him. But ego close. Him is numbless. Just when I thought he had made a best out of the situation, Atomy came flying in. Atomy used his bare hand to repeatedly bumble. But then, again he was wanted and not in his physically bad form. I overpowered him and struck him irreparably. During Sisu Rovent's ending, I grabbed hold of a shovel and used it to Sadami. He intentionally did so since his use was to travel to get rid of Tommy's family as well. Now the missile was still secured to the base after it was already ignited. Igo did not realize that Atomy's and a plan he assumed it was over 40 men who refuses to die. In the end, when I asked Atomy if he had any last word, he simply spread out a Seiko from his mood. Agor finally connected the doors, and by the time he realizes that Agor had released the missile, it was already too late to escape. Igor made an attempt to run, and for a second the missile right in front of his face, and he briefly thought maybe it was not his day to die yet, but he was proved wrong. The missile ultimately consumed a Gore and a vegan exploded, creating grapple in a surrounding area. Atomy, understanding, finally returned home to Finland. He was in a bloody state, but he still managed to carry the logs to Roger. When he handed his passport to the water soldier, they saluted him as soon as they read his name. Atomy was a national hero, and he would be finally returned to the place where he could spend the rest of his life in peace. AIM says so. Row ending, we learned that Atom is and started with his dream project of rebuilding his house. He did not have his family by his side, but at least a house would signify that he were finally in a safe place and soul could rest in peace. Also, for everything that Du has been through, Atomy's fusive pill managed to survive, and he continued to be this brave man's only true companion. Atomy's was busy building the house when a group of men approached him. He instinctively assumed that he had arrived to cause him harm. But when one of men stated that they wanted to help him build his house, he was moved to he has spent such a brutal and merry existence that a certain kindness and genuine respect surprised him. Perhaps in that moment Thomas felt relieved, knowing that it was some good left in the world, and also he did not have his own sons around to help him building to the house. The men in the community showed up and spotted him, while he had always preferred living by himself. The final scene suggested that sometime even a legendary man like a Tommy Scorpy would appreciate some help and support of his community. 2 years after gold discovery, Sisu embarked on a journey to his family house in Karelia. He also left there with his wife and 2 sons before they were brutally murdered by Soviet soldiers since in 1944. Adam's family was brutally murdered by Igor Dragunov. Their bodies were dismembered with a stroll, and they were later fed to be homeless and stray dogs. Aga was held in prison in the Siberia, and he was released under the condition that he disagree and affected the reputation of the Soviet army. He knew he had to act immediately. Atomy's cleverly managed to take down all the soldier, but he spared the go because he did not wish to cause harm to someone who did not try to actively shoot him down. Atomy had no worry that the man he spared was the one who would be ruthlessly killed. His family, I know, had a fair idea of the man he was dealing with. He realizes taking down I Promise would not be an easy task, but he was ready for the challenge. Igo trusted interested soldier on motorcycle and even pilot to take Doni. He was being attacked from our side. Just as he was done killing the motorcyclist, he had to find a solution to protect himself from the airplane. Repaired, and he ended up taking soldier in a bird. Figured was made so he could protect himself there. So he Koi rode again. As he was sailing by, he stumbled upon an abandoned tank. Atom loaded the logs into the tank and used the animate landmine and to somehow cap his way into a Soviet camp, but unfortunately his plan did not pan out the way he will be intended. The tank was destroyed due to the impact and Thomas was left terribly injured. He had no choices left but to surrender. But before stepping out of the tank he had to push the sharp nave blade into his leg. As expected it was repeatedly he was hung for the ceiling of a train wagon like fresh meat, and a hot iron was used repeatedly strike him. He was bleeding from his old body when I stepped in. Hill realizes Adam is an extreme tolerance for physics searcher. But one thing that completely destroyed him was an emerger of his family. So Gore internationally spared out exactly how brutality he would be killed at his wife and son. He added his elder son was facing and brave, and he remembered a little boy because he had attempted to attack the Gore in the eye out of nowhere. He'll try to put up a fight to protect his mother and younger sibling. In 2022, the Finnish and Jai action movie Sisu had a look of one-hit wonder. Ping a greaser prospected and gent platform of necessary. Director Jerry Hencher he did a lesson of George Muller's Mad Max Fury wrote. Principally that there is a serious value in going pit to the matter along a single state narrative line that profitable sleeper he know is this choice. Follow-up which somehow feels more expensive. While still joking in under 90 minutes having seen of this SS indomitable hero. Atomy gains our tragic backstory Antonio Vicious post wherein that named read. Army non-necessary obstacles have been replaced between the oddies and good time. At movie we got one scene of Atomy dismantling his family home beam by beam. And one scene of Dreov being subbed from jail before the parent in the back road of Soviet-occupied Finland. Helander has the voice of a kid playing wargame in the woods. You half expect someone's mom to call everybody in 40. It may be cartoonish, looks sharp, or regrettably misplaced, but the comics. Similar simplicity serves as a reboot to not your blockbuster. You don't need excessive CGI practical special effect as potentially compelling. As to blooded different face as a grief meanwhile offer one grace note after another those beams become a memento then a life rather than a new beginning. Like his photo holds onto the essential torches the rest and goes harder and faster for it. His film showed raising huge STE and G and indeed everywhere else. Sisu Road event is out in November 20th in Australia and November 21st in UK and US. This article was amended on November 21st, 2025. An earlier version suggested the movie was filmed in Finland. However, it was a short in the Estonia. Sisu Road Revenge is a brutal action movie that Pop purposefully goes for a lame and mean execution, but that does not mean there is not a deeper story going on in the surface. The sequel 2022 says so. It brings back the finished Atomic, known to the public as the Immortal for his exceptional battlefield. The film focuses on his effort to bring the house he had with his family back into the Finnish terror which catches the attention of his Soviet Union reunion. What follows in an action movie that goes back unfold from drag darkly hilarious to jaw-droppingly beautiful all-white exploring a story about drama and loss. This road to revenge is a veiled exclusion of the first film pitting Korpion GI Russians equivalent and sadly revealing just how personal their fond is. Drag now is quickly established as a former agent of the Soviet Union whose previous cross-side the cross finally killed contrast innocent. This include Korpa's family, reasoning that Dragunov is the only person alive who can contend with the Immortal. The Soviet leadership frees him for prison and set him before Scorpio. Much of the films know Scorpio's attempt to reach the Finnish border with the remains of his family home. While Sisu benefited from a stance game of cat and mouse between the Corp and a Nazi soldier who encountered him. Sisu Aro is far more rooted in a person conflict. Now is find in a direct contrast to Corp with both men having similar skill set and disaggregate for their enemies. Nobody both men seem to have a similar perspective on killing in the moment but deal with the memory of direction very differently. Drag now back to copy that is a dream of his. Victim plan together and the characters is portrayed as an almost cartoonishly black and white villain. However, it's somewhat similar to copies on This Is guarded for his enemies. However, World Dyer now takes some pride in his work and seek to break the immortal portrayal of it. Corp is shown to be haunted by this past. In the film's final moment, even people coming to help him. His horse initially come across as a threat. Corp is visibly taken away when he does not have to fight a man and is almost here when to help. This is a clear display of the lingering humanity that gives copy to the memory of his family is something played with us slightly in the first room, but become more pronounced in the final moment of Road to Revenge. Sisu Road to Revenge is a fairly self-contained story concluding with Corby envisioning his family by killing Dragnov before completing his journey home. The films end with the Corby reconstructing his family home in Finnish land with the job of help of the local. In short, Corby could be drawn into the further conflict with the Soviet, especially if his action in Terror Tribe were considered an act of the aggression by the army. The Finnish government could recreate Corby of adventure, or even just an innocent civilian could call upon him for help. As for this writing, the future of Gorpy is up in the air. Body Films writer, director Helander and star JMA have expressed interest in a potential CH film, but there is no concrete plan for a follow-up. The ending of Sisu Road to Revenge reflect this. The final shot of the film framed like photograph of Corby and his new Finnish neighbors building the house could be seen as induction in JoJo community. This could give Corby plenty of reasons to defend it on his people, setting up easy narrative part for a third film. Conversely, the pictures could be taken as a funnel epilogue for the character. Proved that he was able to put on his ripples and take off Joel to rebuild the family home given his endurance after the loss of his family and the pain of his battle. Sisu Road to Revenge is a fairly straightforward story about a man trying to move a building from Russia to Finland and a lot of challenges his culture along the way. However, is very much a movie that reckoned with the untended legacy and lingering trauma. Corby is a killing machine, but he is also haunted by the memories of the family he lost and struggled after constantly having to fight for his life. Dragov in the Soviet war to break the illusion of immortal, hoping to turn his unexpected religionary status into one has set out their own control by breaking him. Corp's fury over his family's fate give him that is already some truly ridiculous thing, but it's also left him a quiet shell of a man who barely says a word across to him. Even his new neighbors recognizes him, acknowledging that he can't speak to his drama even as he recognizes it and want to help. Rot is a ridiculous action movie. However, is also a movie where about a man who has to keep moving as slowing John will cause him the loss of his old family. It's a movie about the extreme land someone will go to for both ignorance and pieces, and gives his sorrow to revenge a quite emotional core. The most brutal Nazis killing franchise of the past few years is back with the Sisu Road to Revenge is changing up his story structure this time around once again. Written and directed by Jalmari Helander, the action sequel pick up 2 years after acclaimed predecessor with Jorma and G returning to his home. H. German Sherman alienated by the brutal killing of his family during World War II at the hands of Soviet Red Army. Officer Igo Drag, now played by the Avatar Stefan Lang, looking to start his family and a new no daddy war is ending at home as this mental his home and loads $1 onto a truck driving excess fine land to find a peaceful new home to honor his family memory. However, in an effort to kill the legend of a man who refuses to die, the Kesha be released a dragon and give him near endless resources to hunt. Thus he saw protagonist on, resulting in an explosive race across the country, having originally premiered at a Fantastic Fence of SE September 2025. Sisu Road to Revenge has guaranteed nation whistle second for critic, currently holding a 96% approval rating from critics on Rotten Tomatoes, who have praised the sequel for its inventive action and dark sense of humor. The movie has also gotten off to a strong start at a box office with its final land premiere, grossing nearly $2 million against its $12 million production budget, while also being on track for a $3 million debut in its domestic opening weekend, ahead of his movie's U.S. release. Sim Grant Hermans interviewed Jalmari Helander and Stefan Lang to discuss So Wrote to Me, looking at the difference between the two movies, the structure in which the first could be a camper to join, the idea that assignees are trying to transport his home to a hostile data, create actions any moment like in a road movie with a lot of action. It's entertaining to watch but will slow to shoot when you have a lot of moving vehicle, cars, motorbikes, etc. And also, all the cameras are moving. It is very time consuming and hard to stress for a new tech as the scale increase between the two films and Helander had a bigger budget to work with. The writer-director pointed to the big explosion as being the most exciting set pieces to put together, and while setting the toast as being the moment of all the vehicle, describing putting together the former Helen say the key to pulling them off a lot of planning and work beforehand, especially given the tone of them how to shoot. We only have one trick and therefore have to hope that everything goes as planned. Another key evolution in Sisu, A Road to Restory, is unlike many other man or action franchise. The sequel gives more insight into why Tommy's backstory regarding his families and a person behind it. Explained the day cure of this change came from his portal getting his house back, feeling it to be so original, emotional, and right from the first second. I intend to have an idea that would match the first film and could have better to justify the film. This time is more personal and emotional and cares good action. Second films was premierly finished, and again you brought joint scope a bite here with Stefan Blank in the shirt break too. Fantastic actor as your primary villain. How did your more international casting came about, and what should draw you to see those two in particular? I was thinking about someone's younger, but when your idea came to have Stefan's slang, I immediately thought it was a great idea, and when I had my first conversation with him, it just felt pure. It was awesome to get big and link for Sisu, because Adami Gorby really needs some badass actor for this film. Steffers. Obviously you are no such stronger no playing villain, but every actor has a different way of getting into their villain read, whether it's a physical team, whether it's their backstory, whether it's the voice. What did you find was the best way to get into IO had in the film? As I recall, it had a lot to do with the kind of empyreating myself out. I was really looking to kind of create kind of a void in my own self, and one of the ways I achieved that I didn't enjoy. You mentioned her backstory, and obviously the backstory of a god drag is not relevant to the narrative in a sense, but it is irrelevant to my playing the role. So to be able to create a character who is capable of such kind of gallows good and is systematic evil, it's helpful to understand where that's coming from and how that came about. Once you realizes that this is gas and has been formed the moment of his birth, a child of state that actually form a very early age, well, that journey really make it all the more reserved. Once we got to later point in a film, Ango gets more involved in the action, especially when we finally get to see him and Akemi go and each other. I would love you to hear when it was like when you and your family got to actually share a green jump and both mentally and physically go joy to die with each other. It was a prayer, because he's a terrific pro. I think we bought even without ever saying it had a contract to look out for each other, because if you think about it, we are talking about the train we are in an enclosed space there, and everything is broken and trusted. There are shed or sharp edges and everything. Wherever you go, there's a dozen ways to dang yourself and hide yourself. That's interesting, because that create a little bit of watch your ascension, which I think is good. But working with him, we worked well together. It was a fine dude. Whenever we did go together, a lot of pences were thrown. A lot of folks were stabbed into a pimple, and both of us walked away from it feeling like we would done our job, and also we did not busted broke my hands either. our own or our acting partner. I also loved his own stab. I wanted to touch on the ego because I was gratefully surprised by the sheer brutality with the combination of the impaling him and blowing him up from many of a legendary. If you give him more crafting to script. I always thought you would die with the missile because that was the first idea. With a train. I thought how cool it would be to ride on a train moving with a rocket and a big missile. So when he had a Nile would see it of him safer laying explosive ending in his sorrow too. Revenge has been unpackaged by director Jalmari Helander was explained moment. Lying portrays a gold drag a Soviets officer who killed Ottoman's Jorma family. Serving as the sequel's central antagonist Senshin. With Igor getting blown up by a ballistic missile on a train that atomic. Activated this in an interview with Green RS Grant here's 42nd installment. Grant explained his reason behind Lang getting blown up with a missile in Sisu. Wrote to the director stated he that was the first idea thought for the train. Centered scene making it inevitable that he would be like killed in such a manner. What Helander had to say blow speaking of Ego's dad I was gleefully surprised. By his sheer brutality after with the combination of the warhead impelling him and blowing him up. How many tradition of a did you give him when crafting the crypt? I always know he would die with the missile because that was the first idea with the train. I thought how cool it would be to try on train moving with a rocket and a big missile. So when I heard that I know the missile would be the seed of him. The train sequences was the biggest element of Sisu or Rotary 2. Revenge is ending with Tommy originally using the missile as a booster to catch. Up to flaying a pair fight with Lang's character almost the protagonist. Luckily the missile is still armed killing Igor and allowing Adam to go back to Finland. His revenge. Satisfied review for Sisu wrote Revenge have emphasized the major amount of violence in the sequel. This included a number of creative death scenes for numerous characters mostly cannoned as Adamy attempt to go a good go the antagonist however had the most furious data fall befitting a high octane. Rotary Revenge holds a 96% rating on Rotten Tomatoes from critics as of writing the readily available praise of. The film section scene is what make it stand out among other and designer as Hell status a miscellaneous idea for the trend scene. The grand action film won't be the only villain role Lang has in the movies this year. Given how memorable Six or a major villain that is clear and the dream behind the movie have a nicing plot yet satisfying that scene it makes stand out in the market while also delivering on a fitting conclusion for the second chapter of Atomic Story. A slipper hit in 2022. Jalmari Helander Sisu was a cartoonishly dawn and dirty underline rush for action fans. Nor not like the old Kyo Max decades earlier. Their particular comparison grown even more avalor to Revenge in which German seemingly a likable protagonist must battle endurable bad guys at high speed on various form of transport is not unnecessarily better and the larger scale sequel almost imitatively lack some of the freshness that made the original such a kick. Still the director's undeniable flair for gleefully excessive mayhem and purposively pacing will more satisfy those who loves his predecessor. It comparatively lean mean progress feels particularly welcome after so many descents again rides that it delivered for less bunch at much greater length and expense. Last time around the common surefine army commander Adamy Gorby only want to left alone as Var down finding gold in the lab plan awakened. The greed of departing Nazi forces with zero idea who were messing with the one man that scared already claimed many unfound Russian life after Soviet forces killed his family during the brief but brute this time the terrifyingly fit 16. Something protagonist is encountered in 1946. The global conflict officially well over. He is driving in a huge truck to his old home which thanks to redrawn brothers now lies in Russian territory. He intended to dismantle then resemble it in what remains of Finland. But Soviet authorities have not forgotten that his legend snuffed out more than 300 out. Troops. Red Army officer Igor Dragunov is released from a Siberian prison where he is being held for committing an incurable needless water by a caseably big week to ensure Tommy never sees Finnish soil again. The two adversaries are uniquely matched in a Kororpin knows the utter brutality murdered his wife and son, while Dagna won't feel he is a truly completed job until the father is dead too. This setup takes about 10 minutes, after which it's one dynamic surfaces after another. Atomy managed to escape. An initial roadblock home Ambio, then attacked by the motorcyclist, followed by fighter plane with a machine gun. After a brief aquatic interja, there is a portrait climax abroad, a train speeding back to Siberia bearing marriage armed Soviet plus one-blooded sheer prisoner. Needless to say, the seal odds are stacked, and guess a poor rice that is divided into the 6 title chapter. These episodes are mostly axe and mouse staging, stunt work, and CJ occasionally. Had the violence come so thick, we are not quite sure that just happened anyone. Within these suspended, this brief bonds established a few hairbreadth escape are precarious, notably one where Tommy make a tang to midair acrobatics. Truly past the barrier, entertaining as it is, such craziness is not so well spotted by a thread of black comedies as within wasn't fast. So you could also argue there is a by too much devailing on general likeness here as a mailman in the for not seem to be frequently digging bullet and other object out of his flesh, spending pretty much the last half-hour blooding in boxer short amid near better appear not to bother him in the slightest, but term retains a degree of full anti-humor. Even some warm despite never getting so much as a word to speak. Lang's exploitatively raw speech comprises most of the dialogue. If Dragnav is not the most distinctive villain role he ever has, his he shows well receiving a particularly explosive exist as reward. Break spot is brief, while later cast memorable provide no more than coin and photo. The Kinney performers playing the protagonist is the Jerry Bull disappear for quite some time in one among several manner of his plot hole in the Highlander that is the best to stop ever. Short, largely Estonia Sis wrote to the revenge rather than the integrating in. The most suspect from Mao Zama's wider screen cinematography to the physical design contribution, the fairly Senate action bomb ver of Jody Sappa and Tuma's originally score. Get some flavor via passage of through singing and spectator Finnish writer. Director Jalmari Helander, Sisu 2022 S. John World War II and action of the play. John Wick by way of the bastard balance is the narrative shredness with the generally blood-eating. It's a kind of movie where the main character, a jamming Key, survives any underwater assault by slating a Nazi's rod and bedding through his wine pipe. Sisso's cartoonish violence animated by some cheaper than they work look visual effect made a movie slight B-movie designed for cult status on Room was a fear to come. Yet entire films Highlanders for violent spectral eventually reached the point where it all become noise to say it's equal to cleaner means to revenge truly. Scale things back would be wrong, but Helanders does boil his recipe onto the essential, allowing the vision's world building to evaporate any technical proficiency. Far shows of Taken Roven is a follow-up so relentlessly efficient that it cannot even budget to give it a chart. Lead character, a proper name Roto Revenge, picks up 2 years after the original word has ended, and Atomy, the so-called one-man Deathseeker, is on a road onto his homeland of earlier, now occupied by the Soviet Union, with his trusty Terror in the passenger seat. Atomy drives he flat across the desolate Finnish countryside before crossing the border into any mean territory. There are fewer sang men on the side of the road these days, but there plenty of danger as a Red Army fortifiers, no domination. His mission is to demist his family. Cottage log by log loaded our lumber into the truck and find a quiet plow to rebuild. His presence at the border allow a force mentioned. I am named KGB officer currently stationed at a Siberian prison, while most if not all of the window dressing from the first movie gold prospecting any female character is left for the vulture Atom infamy as a one-man Soviet killing machine has not. Legend has it that once killed hundreds of Soviet, and even the war is over. They would like some playback. It's not a Tommy who traveled the road to revenge, but added a man, this nameless officer. sent to take him out. I go drag now the man who killed Adamy's family made a shovel for all his native grace rotary revenge leaves make murder scene just a little bit more than all the other killing broken into 5 chapter each. Size with the western that humanized with RO and use a rotary range carefully. Escalated auto missed it's not long after he load his vehicle with his dissemble that drag now go catch up to the Adam army who are trained to protect his former home and show as the Soviet lay seek by the ground and air. But even as he moves from his set pieces to set pieces, it's defined by a different vehicle and many ways you can die in one. It's a Helander's grasp of the fundamental that make royery revenge such a bloody glide. The Oro George Miller are apparent in Helander's overtop missed letter laughter and narrative deficiency. They are also present in a cherry clarity of the Micah Osama's cinematography, which is an instant smiling inspired moment of natural grace. There is a coherence and gravity to RO to revenge is carnage, which make the action more painful and satisfying. Behold Helander's composition take on the grammars of silent film thanks to the drama's spin, nonverbal performances, and editing which has the crispness of veteran stand-up crackling with the set pieces that the audiences can't wait to here pay off. A late film sequences abroad a Soviet train take a excellent advantage of a Barian, a sleeping soldier dosing and turning into their bunk J. Failing arms transferred into a human security system. Adam B's a char act. Buster Coon as he advances through each princess sequences. Even better automist Bug Bunny inspired violence is rarely unearned, making it even more satisfying than predecessor which Reve better suited for gift than film's revenge made short ta clear heightening for moment to moment rather than magnified as a new landscape, a new weapon or a tank outfitted with explosive SES to revenge is a simply more refined and enjoyable version of his predecessor by showing what little form man on his initial idea craft an action movie that does more with lost their moment when the sequel nearly overdoes it when Helander's thirst for blood threatens no power the film, yet in the simplicity it finds a steady their peakness gradually peak and reset. It is not a profound or enlightening but for 89 minutes of fury road confidently flipping tank and unleashing hell along. There is both coherence and gravity to Roy's carnage, which make the action more painful and satisfying to behold. Helen's composition take on grammars of silent film thanks to Tommila's paint nonverbal performances and violent editing which has the fashion stand-up clicking with a setup that the audiences can't wait to here pay off in Sisu Road to Revenge. Jalmari Helander violent sequel 2023. Sony had to go at Scorpio more jam for the bloody road trip a flake they all learn skate effort to cultivate atomic Scorpio as next Johan. Like a child in the kingdom who was right of sharing these toys. So his productions company Stage 6 screamed, "No man who needs a blood when you have a man who refuses to die as your hero." I am being facetious of course, but not as much as you might think. The first time we met I told me he was just to leave his solitary life. He is walk by his side and riches in his stell. He was content. Of course, as life would have it, there is often people who can't mind their own jam business. The people in this particular story just happened to be Nazis. Too bad for him. He was a man perceived as alone and on all too easy target for. Little did they know who J4___ good. If you have seen what had transpires, you know it did not end well. Of clicks in, and if you thought that would be the end of their URR. Not alone in thinking so. But here we are in 2025 and man damn it, the Allen himself has returned for some much needed as it most brutal and discerning. He is quite severed but a genuine German if crossed. And who is dumb enough to ruin this man's day this time? The Soviet Union, of course, a commander of Red Army. To the specific, what we discover in this is a man that is widely considered the person that created what would ultimately become the mate of the man, who refuses to die by killing his entire family during water. An invincible fire was It within the army that will likely never burn out. This release from prison. Honda groans that he will finish the job. Annalie. No is a culprit of this man's greatest agony. But all Atomy want to is dismantle the home he has firmly lived into or rebuild it elsewhere and to live the rest of his life in peace. The Russian have a plan and they will. Wish they did not start out small. Our joy in the watches, so to speak, before diving altar way in eagle learns quickly not everything changes. The man does that. Does not speak has not grown any less formidable or any less cold-blooded. After the initial reunion, Jagger opens the float-scared fasten wheel as a unit of armored motorcycle soldier who realizes virtually that a truck is very built a weapon as a piston is all in how you detailed. Then comes an attack from the air and for a time they get the better of him. But he is never out of long their past connect them out his veins. We'll savor that thread with the extreme prejudice. This is a road to revenge. There's a lot of influences throughout his movie's DNA. Spaghetti Western from Sullivan and a resulting sequel of Johann Robo's journey is a spiritual successor of Mad Max Bastard and perhaps most obvious John Wick. It carves on the inspiration of these stories to build what is simple in premise but never lacking in intensity and pacing. This is pure fan services, and so often this is seen in negative light. It's not what you might call a masterpiece, but it does exactly what you promised to do in some either all. Right so and the sequel are for the world-thirsty action. I for one I am trailer that see Action JMO 2022 has found a sequels. This angel may surrender scared stoic silent action hero a charming corpsumely dispensed multiple FS in ways appropriate to this bigger budget. But instead of facing Nazis this term he is up against multiple goons from Scallion's Russia. A brief prologue explained how friend and hated Kosid landed the Soviet Union after World War II, unfortunately from Cork part of the and lost in where his family lived before River. A brief prologue explained how Finland had to save land to his Soviet children after World War II. Unfortunately, far bay part of the land lost in his family. Part lived before. They were murdered by low-ego Dragnov and a Red Army officer who won a bad nurse with a shovel and he chopped them into the little pieces. I tripped down memory lane to reprocure a lorry load of wooden beams from his old home. So Copy might build a new house. Within Fun Land new borders. A resulting track now being instructed to hunt him down. Kill set pieces after set pieces. Of hugely entertaining ultraviolent mayhem with copies determined to get to the border with his beam. Palm hell or high water. Not to mention bullets. Bombs, missile, trucks, tank, trains, planes, and a plethora of human cannon. Forger. China fans have understand that none of these violence is meant to be taken seriously in real life. There is obviously no way Corby could survive the intense level of brutality made out to him. In a particular nasty needless to say, Corby gives as good as he gets and tells some living up to the title. As before, the film informs us that Sisu is an unthrust table finish that refers to strike detection and hisness in the face of the unpreempted hardship. Jazz hair. That had me aired and giggling like a 12 years old who would be snuck out into an age-destructive film. Speaking of which, I am Adonish. This got passed by the British Border Film Classification Video 15 rather than an 18 certificate, but action span brief are the same, especially with thrilling sequences. This expertly choreographed. Coming into 2025, Sisu Road to Image was one of my most anticipated films of the year. I loved the first Sisu, and judging by the trailer, it looked like the sequel would be just as good if not better. It promised her to retain everything that made the original movie such a blast while also upping the end. And that was music to my ear. I could not bear to see another bloody adventure with my favorite Finnish action hero. So when Tickets went on sale. I booked a seat for opening day as soon as I got to Jones. Sisu Road to Revenge was written and directed by Jerry Salinger and Starman Lang and Jetbreak. In the films copy the Finnish soldier who killed hundreds of Russian combatants during World War II. Has gone back into the Soviet, try to reclaim the home he once knew. See, the land used to belong to Finland, but after the war that entire area was given to Russia. Of course, the army does not want to live in the Soviet Union. So he dismantled the house, puts the logs on his truck and drives back to his home country. But along the way, he runs into some Russians who want him dead. And the only way to stop them is to kill them first, right off the bat. I want to let you know that you don't need to see the original Sisu to watch Road to Revenge. This is a standalone sequel in this vein of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and Glass Onion. An ease-out mystery, so it's equally accessible to the newcomer and Sisu fans alike. You just need to be a fan of great action, and if you fit that bill, I think you're going to love this movie. Once the Mahim start to revenge, Keith gives it on this gag. Until the credit began to roll, sure, it stops to take a short bet, everyone. But you will never have to wait long for the pace to pick up again. At first, the film is very reminiscent of the two best made The Road, Various and Fury Road. Pretty much the entire first half is just a dummy trying to drive back to Finland. So whenever the Russians go on the attack, you can't help but think of Max and Furia driving a big rig at Desert Highway. Don't get me wrong, the Revenge does not quite reach the dead defying height of those Stone Cold classic, but she's pretty damn good. Seeing a charming thing fast and creatively right through his stalkers. And his thing of blood is beauty, and I mean bloody, and when movie switches gear around your midway point, it does not lose a single step. In particular, the second half of this film really highlight the concept that gives the franchise its name. Sisu is a Finnish word that refer to an unbreakable grit intensity even in the face of seemingly impossible obstacles, and Atomy is pretty much the living embodiment of that. I am not going to spoil anything, but I will say that if you think Johan Rambo stitching himself up in First Blood is impressive, just wait till you see what Atomy does here. He exhibit an almost superhuman result. And Dr. Jorma brilliantly brings that unflinchingly determination to life with body language and facial expression alone. Atomy has no dialogue, in Road to Revenge lets you know he's not one to be trifled with. So a single look from this guy is more than enough to put the fear of God into the anybody who gets in his way. Anybody, that is, except the movies. Villain, a SO officer named Igor Dragunov. He's played by Seth Lang, and Lang is just as good as his heroic counterpart. He amuses the character with the same kind of fearless that makes a Tommy such a great protagonist. But he transforms into a much more sinister key. Everything this man says and does is dripping with the unwavering, so anybody can take at him. Being said, I don't want you to think things so. Road Revenge is a pure short of that line with no underlying substances. As the title suggests, this is a revenge film, but it's also more than that. Is a story of man who was deeply affected by the loss of Lewis's life in Gears, and JMA near S side of character as well. When Tommy first returned home and memories of his family come floating back, is not afraid to let the character's emotions overwhelm him. He shows that even a man can try when he thinks back to the family that was so clearly ripped away from him. And as a man myself, I really appreciated that it's easy to view this franchise as little more than a hollow exercise in a beast brand out of Toxic. But seeing it explains Genoshan, shows there is more to manhood than just beer, brawn, and babies. On the flip side, I did have one issue with Sisu, A Road to Revenge. As much as I love the action, there are a couple of times when it switches the bones off. I can't get into a specifiers without spoiling some of the fun. But I can tell you what your worries offender involves. An airplane and few perfectly praised log. It's just too much to swallow even. in movie like this. So I wish writer-director Jalmari Helander and he ended it. Just an angel. Thankfully the God as good as say so Roven for outweighed that. One flaw: the excellent action and great character and surprising thematic substances make this film everything I was hoping for and even a little more. Granted, it's not for everyone, but if bloody action cinema is your wheelhouse, I highly recommend that you check this movie out. You ever wonder what would happen if Mad Max Fury Road Me Fast and Furious misfranchised that my friend is Teller Sisu a Road to Revenge? If I had a week, I could not tell you all of the way Salander sequel goes balls through the wall of nearly every second of it run. Time to be fair, I would not want to Roven is one of those films that is absolutely essential to watch on the biggest screen possible with the largest crowd that you can find it the first time is good, filing a charming copy on his journey to cash and gold through Nazis-occupied Finland, but it's not great. It delivered only brutality it promised, but everything about the first film, wish to be clear, I enjoyed, left me watching more. Road Revenge is that more and some reason that you need to see it in the theater, being that you deserve to hoot and holler at a second away. The fantastic has clawed the desert at me absolutely, and most anyone standing in this way. There are at least 3 term in my notes with about 15 underlines under him because the moment was so big. Appropriately, Road to Revenge's journey is little but different than the first films. It's more personal, which only make the violence all the more delightful, and A Road to Revenge takes place in 1946. 2 years after the original, Atomy has returned to the shell of his home where his family was brutally murdered during World War II. The sun battle-dried soldier slowly demolishes the home piece by piece, taking care to stack it in lumber on the back of truck with the intent to take it Finland and able to live out the rest of his with his trust pop. U.C. Dragnov is the man who slaughtered Atomy's family, chopping them up piece by piece to save illumination. He was captured at the end of the war, and he does not have to kindly to the fact that Atomy has become a legion across the land. These are rotary events is split into 5 chapters, each one more delightfully unhygiene than it last. The set pieces in the films are impressible in the most beautiful way possible. It's be a very single aspect of the first one, both in the dancer Tommy and his faithful pop face, and we have slow he unleashes on those who own his family and here to stand in way of his goal. Most importantly is that it looks good in doing it. A lot of reaction is a non-seally extreme, but it looks so good that I fully believe a single man could accomplish all of King's Atomy does with a strong grasp of physics and a can to attitude. Nonetheless, whether may find it harder to buy it into. As I alluded earlier, it's not just amplified action that makes his Oro to Revenge bigger and better than his predecessor, but the heart as well. Tom delivers another completely silent performances as he's a single line at the end of Sisu. But there are no closing word for the William this gowned. This time with his character Sadness playing just as critical of a role as his rage. Before he was a man just trying to catch in his gold. Now he's a man just trying to rebuild after war his region and destroyed his family. He slaughtered a lot of knees and more, and a few red he is tired and they just want some bell-armed peace. The longing place to inspire and is beautifully woven with the sadness that comes along the way of his incomparable. The unjust expositions of violence and sadness in the second require one hell of a score. The composer is not listed anywhere just yet. Released worldwide until November 21st. But the old one hell of a job elevating very second affection. Board sweeping and starting the music of Sisu Road to Revenge is essential to elevating this late to speechless and reaction explosively. While Bomba's Cat have returned, it is so Road to Revenge ending that ends up being the ultimately piece to give any narrative hint would you bought you any film deserve, but where did the film is loud it is quiet, frankly it's also brilliant adjective that would unfortunately give too much way suffice to say that you go to war with a Tommy across a 2 film and in the end his closing moment are an utterly perfect experience of anyone who's been along on the journey. Say So Revenge ended up being my absolute favorite film of Fantastic First. And it was up against safe competition with the like Black Fonto. Good luck. Have fun, don't I? And one battle after another. It is big in every way it need to be big and small in the way that it need to be small performances in both. Neck and heartbreaking and safe and long as the perfect monster on screen. He landed absolutely ordering himself here. Just be prepared for a real ride. One of the most shocking and surprising action hits in years was 2022 Sisu and its new sequel, Sisu Road to Revenge. She's proving to be even more popular with a high Rotten Tomato score from both critics and odes. In a time when action movies are being out a cookie-cutter family, Sisu was a war movie, a revenge movie, and an action movie that put an old man into one of the most brutal battles of survival seen on screen for many years. Aries and critics reunited in their prayers for the movie, and it frequently appeared in the top 10 on a Dreaming Star years later. Not a sequel since A Royal Revenge has arrived in the cinema and is blowing away high praise of his predecessor. MovieWeb's own Lee calls the sequel a boner. Blood-soaked sequel fan have been waiting for and has seemed to be a good summation of the film that has somehow managed to live up to the hype of the first movie. The synopsis of Sisu Road to Revenge rates Sisu Road Revenge as well-to-wall cinematic action event, a sequel to the original sleeper hit Sisu, returning to the house where his family was brutally murdered during the war. The man who refuses to die is lured on a drug and is determined to rebuild it somewhere safe in their honor. When the Red Army commander who killed his family come back to hellbent on finishing the job. A relentless high-popping cross country chases and shows to fight to the dirt full of clever, unbelievable action services. While there are many movies that have been accused for ignoring the law of physics, defying logic and requiring a suspension of this belief that even the most accommodating movies cannot quite buy into, Sis Road Revenge flies in the face of dissent. Make the carnage of George Miller's made movies look like a gentle period drama. On it debuted. The sequel is getting on a 95% score and 90% popcorn meter rating, both of which have stepped up in a notice from Sisu. Audiences have been similarly positive, saying the sequel takes a raw intensity of the first movie and turns it into Sisu versus Mad Max Quentin and MCU explosion. Sisu Road reviews even managed to remind some reviewer the controversial Force and Furious space exploration, but in this movie is absolutely ridiculous and I am here for it. Sisu is currently available to stream for free on Tobia and is worth watching before getting to be SMA to watch even more bunker sequel to Bloody Glory. There is obviously no streaming date available for Sisu Road said, but he will be sure to let you know when it is announced. Jean Lu said that all you need to make a movie is girl and a gun finish that Helen respectfully disagrees. He is on no girl at all as long as he has a lot of gun and a willy inventory. Approach to construction material. At least we can assume as much from this Wizard action sequel. We see this leg hero go looting nuclear on a global superpower. 2022 Sis told the tale of one F.A. prospected atomy demolishing a battling of Nazis with extreme prejudice in the dying days of World War II. A silver of backstory established that her previously gone one-man army against the Red Army because they slaughtered his family. Now the even more heavily scared hero crosses into USSR territory. ANX. Land immediately after the war on a personal mission to his old homestead. He's a rebel prompt to the Soviet power to open a prison in Siberia and release a go-drag held there for his part in that long-ago massacre of Tommy's family. DRA now his sword must go and kill a Tommy and Bision that he helped created, avenging the honor of Remy. Dane now has a sense of swift fire and list of few hundred disposable Goss accompany him. He will lead them because at Tommy's little way with a phone object puts even John F. to shame. Anyone can kill a guy with a pencil. It takes real invention to crash a plan with a plank of wood. Every sub-object on a green hair except perhaps some of the grass becomes an instrument of that. At some point, it's all be gold iron and leftover war. Tools and the Cold War weapon. And Adam is fluent in all of them even if he never says a word. Helen's filmmaking is as lean as there are quick moment of scene setting at beginning and edits are so minute in between of non-stop mayhem he be corrected into reaction. Adam needs to get his cargo home as well as himself, and that admission tells you more about him man than any number of as he said his job and in yours fing the ask the challenger. You can be sure that there will be blood. What happened for the explosive sequel of a meeting action bro? One asked for Sisu try usually requests experiences. I'm mentioning later on lady directors repeat what worked in the films without offering much beyond and a factory formula that odes enjoy the first time and will likely enjoy again. However, in Sis Road to Revenge, filmmakers Dead Herringer refuses to repeat his initial installment and instead make everything more violent and exhilarating, turning the greedy silent Atomy into a playful and operating such a demorning cartoon of course who believe Sanma should only survive to be an illusion of reality. We'll hear this movie especially during a broad thing sequences that does be first and furious and a corpus of SS broad, but you honestly gives a damn about logic and realism when you have got it in an LS minute. A one coolest thing ever after Helen fragments like story into a 6-chapter. It seems more like a dissection that hamper the movie's flow when it gets going because it does not take longer for Sisu Road to remain to switch interaction mode and never let up from there. In fact, there are no tangible moment of rest as soon as Helena craft a car chase worthy of Mad Max and cranks of death with each pacing action sequences is all black and unrelenting like the first, but quickly become more comedic as a Tommy must find clever ways to defeat the Darless Dead Army and a deliriously unhygiened officer in his pursuit. All of it is about it is obviously white work in the fact, and that is so broad is mostly a silent movie that hies back to the work of the Buster is helling benefit to tell a story or to please represent intense emotions as bad guys are gloriously in 1,000 different ways. He let his images speak for James, and his camera with some autographer and Vor Sama is much better controlled than in the first film. The images have a more in Road to Revenge. Challengers seem to be understand that while the dramatic core at the heart of Adam's revenge is not fun, everything around it can be as such as must respond to that specific tone and not to be afraid to get in the process. Since your fun and camera should be playful and your entrance cutting from joy action scene are captured and choreographed. Lucky Killy Helanders as seriously he is skilled as general artist and Helma for more confident entry rand rest of his fear filmography. It's refreshing to see a filmmaker take his criticism to heart and work to define his study's impulses, rather than make the same thing but with a different antagonist than in the first. There is an active desire to do something different while also giving more award AES like from the first installment, namely JMA leaning further into the comedy as seen in the flourish we get from him in the prayer entry that in which is pride with the endless braver sequences deser and holler and forget about what washed illusion of faulty that most movies try to represent. Every surf faces get more cartoonish to the few's benefit, leading up to a train sex climax that feels redent at first glance, but it's so thrillingly entertaining one can't help but have a smile on their face. Balances out at this plastic comedy to build up tension so ridiculously in your face. Conclusion. Feels like a proper send-off to the protagonist who will hopefully build a more peaceful life by the time he is done exacting the most popcorn showing from the you can think.